Welcome back. Now, Boris Johnson isn't going quietly. His tenure in number 10 Downing Street as the Prime Minister of this country ends, of course, around about Tuesday lunchtime, when whoever wins the battle to be Britain's next Prime Minister is sworn in by Her Majesty the Queen up in Balmoral. It's likely to be Liz Truss, of course. Now, in the meantime, Boris, his parting shot, apart from telling us to buy a 20-quid kettle in order to save £10 a year, is to try to change the nature of the balance of power, really, in the House of Lords, which, of course, is very much geared towards the Labour Party and the Lib Dems. Basically, there's a left-wing bias in the House of Lords, strangely. And Boris is allowed his resignation list. He's allowed to nominate a number of peers, as all parting prime ministers are. But also, he's tried to add to that a blatant political list. He wants two lists, his personal resignation list and a political list, because he says the House of Lords isn't fair. So he wants to flood the House of Lords with his mates, his Tory mates, to give it a better balance for the Tories and, frankly, to give himself a massive sphere of influence. My point would be there's 758, something like 758 peers, Lords, sitting in the upper chamber and rising almost by the week. It is the second largest legislative chamber in the entire world. How absurd is that? After the Chinese Assembly, the vast Chinese Assembly. And surely we've got to stop this political patronage. We've got to do something about this second house because, democracy doesn't even get a look in. It's all about politicians creating spheres of influence, putting their mates in so they can get done what they want done. It's just wrong. And people like you and me, citizens of this country, don't even get a look in. That's my view. I don't know what my next guest will feel. He's the leader of the SDP party, William Clouston. Hello, William.
Hi, Kevin.
Where do you stand on this? I just think it's getting beyond a joke. I mean, you have prime ministers, leaders of political parties, sort of almost month in, month out, seem to appoint new lords. They get kind of Christmas lists, they get Easter lists, they get resignation lists, and this vast chamber of ermine-clad peers gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Boris's parting gesture is to try to change the balance a bit, frankly, to get himself a lot of influence, I would imagine. But this patronage has got to stop, hasn't it?
I totally agree with you. I think the House of Lords, in principle, is wrong. There are some very good people there, Maurice Glassman and Claire Fox and what have you. You some good people, and some of them are very good. But in principle, it's wrong. What Boris Johnson should do is do a little bit of thinking. Why did we leave the European Union? One of the reasons was that we didn't want to be governed by unelected people that we can't remove. I mean, that's the description of the House of Lords. So we've got to have a look at it. It's astonishing, Kevin, that this has dragged on for basically 100 years. What Johnson will do in his resignation list, not all prime ministers have them, by the way, but he will. It's not a huge scale. He might get 15 or 20 people possibly across, but he's doing the same as Lloyd George did and the same as Harold Wilson did, and it's cronyism, and we've had enough of cronyism.
Yeah, the body in charge of this is the House of Lords Appointments Commission. They have let it be known that Boris's bid to have two lists, their answer to that is no way. But I think there's a wider issue here, is, we can't keep letting these politicians sort of appoint their mates. We know what happens. You get these sort of mediocre backbenchers who spend 40 years, representing somewhere, without notice. And then they get this bunce of a 300 quid a day kind of sinecure in the House of Lords. They've just got to turn up, have lunch and get their money. And we're paying for it. And there's no democracy here. Why can't we have a second chamber, like the Senate in America, that is democratically elected? This is supposed to be a democracy, William.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I mean, on that question of people popping in and getting their allowances, there have been stories about Lords leaving the taxis running while they sign in and get the same taxi out. It is being abused. It is favoritism. It is cronyism. And we've had enough of it. So I think we need to get rid of it. We, as a party, have a policy which is slightly different to having two chambers at UK level. I think the thing that we're not doing, the trouble is when you look at the Constitution, you look at part of it, the whole thing sort of falls apart. What's happened is that Blair's devolution settlement for Wales and Scotland has left England dangling. So England should have its own parliament. Now, we support that in the SDP. We think it should. I think an English parliament with a house in York, somewhere like that's very sensible. Do a bit of levelling up that way. But if you do that, you can't really have two chambers at the UK level. So we propose one chamber, so it would be unicameral. You can have that work if you have a committee system. A lot of other countries have it. But it is. I mean, what you can't do is ignore it. I mean, people get annoyed about these mates and the favoritism every single time someone resigns, or every single time someone contributes massive amounts of money to the Tory or the Labour Party. We've seen that cash for peerages. But, we shouldn't be surprised as a public. I mean, the large parties sell their policies.
I would say that one of Boris's problems is he's very much of the establishment, and he still lives in a world where, it's a old boys club, you look after each other, you look after your friends, and never mind the public. That is the elite world that he lives in. And this parting gesture on his part proves that he hasn't learned that actually there's a wind of change blowing through this country. And those kind of ways, I think, sooner or later are going to die out.
They've got to go, Kevin. But it's not just that. The biggest thing, I mean, I think the House of Lords is a complete anachronism and it's got to go. But the biggest question, the thing that would really, really do it, and the thing that would address the major problem, which is that the values of people in Parliament don't reflect the values of people out there in the country, is proportional representation. I think these two dreadful monopoly parties that dominate our politics and have mismanaged it. Look at the hash they've made over energy generation, power generation, migrant crisis, the housing crisis. These are totally incompetent people. And that it's very difficult to challenge them because of the electoral system. We need PR. I think PR is going to come. I don't think people are going to put up with the present status quo for much longer.
I'm going to let you say that. I haven't really quite formulated my thoughts on that, so I respect your view on it, and I'll come back to you on it. Now, just before you go, William, the SDP party's moment hasn't quite come, but I'm sure it will in the future. If you were becoming Prime Minister on Tuesday, what would be the first thing on your priority list?
The first thing is to cap the price of energy at source. If they don't do that, families will be hit, households will be hit, but just as importantly, businesses will be hit, and the pubs and the hospitality industry will start closing, and factories will start closing, and you'll have a hell of a time getting that back. Yes, it'll be expensive, but the way we propose, and our policy will be out at 12 o'clock tomorrow on our website, but basically you need to cap it, you need to put a line of loan finance direct to the energy companies to cap it at £2,000 and a commensurate cap for businesses. If they don't do that, it is expensive, Kevin, to do that, and you'd have to pay it back over 10 or 15 years, but it's a hell of a lot more expensive not to act. If you don't act, you lose your tax base, you destroy your economy. So I'm afraid it's another situation where, do nothing won't do.
Have the energy companies been profiteering, do you think?
No, not necessarily. I think Ofgem regulate them, but the system is wrong. I mean, these are natural monopolies, and they should be in public ownership. That's what we think. That's what the logical, sensible state would do. And then, I mean, I've never seen what social use or economic use there is in 90-odd companies taking a bet on wholesale gas and energy prices and retailing it to the customers. It's just chaos. I don't see why that helps at all.
So you talk about nationalisation. I mean, the trouble with nationalisation is I look at all these politicians in power and think they couldn't run a bath, let alone a company.
Well, I mean, you need the experts in the industries to run it. I mean, I don't deny that. I'm not saying we have a political class that is particularly competent. But look at the situation now. Whether you look at water or railways or anything else, railways is a shambles. I mean, the bizarre thing about the British political class, Kevin, is that they think the British government can't run our railways, but they think that the French and the German and the Dutch and Italian government can, because that's what they do. Those contracts are given to those countries. And it's the same with nuclear power. utter incompetence. Sizewell, which is the major project, you've got two projects, one at Sizewell and one at Hinckley. I'm in favour of those,
Yeah, me too.
in principle. But why do you outsource those to the French government? I mean, I think
It's strange.
It's very strange. These people, these Conservatives, get elected pretending they care for the country. And I would argue, if you want to basically outsource your major projects of that kind to the French, you've got to really hate this country to do that. And I think they should be run out of power.
William, let's get you on next week if you're around, and we'll have a proper chat about all sorts of that. That would be great. Good to talk to you now. Thank you very much for your time. William Clouston, he's the SDP.